webinars on this. There's been some webinars on TCPA, and I really wanted to get on here and just do a webinar. Really, when you think about TCPA and what's going on, you could look at definitions, dates, days, and disclaimers. And really, if you look at those four things, you pretty much know everything you need to know. For the big thing is January 27th, the date, right? January 27th, 2025. That's the date for one-to-one consent. One-to-one consent. And I'm a part of a group called REACH, which 2 days ago we submitted to FCC to stay the actual one-to-one consent guideline for it to go into effect. And that was because Trump did an executive order. It basically asked all the different within the government to look at anything that's not passed yet, and to look at holding off on passing any new laws or new regulations. And so we sent that to the FCC on Thursday, which was yesterday, and it was denied. So unless something changes today, this is going into effect on Monday. When you think about one-to-one consent, I don't think it's a bad thing. Like one-to-one consent, really, like if you look at the lead generators, you have lead generators and lead aggregators, right? Lead aggregators are compiling a bunch of leads. I shouldn't say go away. You'll still be able to buy leads, but a lead aggregator, when they're selling to 100 different people, you can't use any kind of regulated technology like autodialers and all that whenever you're looking at shared leads, essentially. So like the realtor.com, I've seen a lot shared with realtor.com that they're canceling a lot of the lead gen they're getting from them. And that's a big reason why, because a lot of realtor.com, a lot of the companies are going one-to-one consent. So they're going in these markets and partnering with bigger companies that are taking $200,000 or $300,000 worth of leads in the bigger cities. Like that's what they're paying to get leads from these, realtor.com and Zillow and everything else. Well, Zillow's flex, but they're still switched to where they're actually charging now as well. So anyway, yeah, that's the date. January 27th, 2025. That's a one-to-one consent. The other date that most people are not talking about is coming up is April 11th, 2025. And that's the other rule where if you opt out of text, you're also opting out of phone. So if somebody texts you or you text somebody and they respond, hey, stop texting me, you actually have to pull them out of, you can't call them either. Where the way it is right now, if I opt out of a text, I could still call you. Or if I opt out of a phone call, I could still text you. But the new guideline, if they opt out of one or text or phone call, you have to opt them out of both. Now that's the one where I'm not too sure it's going to get passed or not. Like it's passed and it's going into effect, but that's the one that really pushing hard on, because the problem with it is if you think of like healthcare, right? You could opt out of marketing text from like healthcare. Well, you're opting out of all text, meaning like communication on, whatever it may be about about something that you have done, maybe billing or whatever. So if you opt out of marketing, they're saying you're also opting out of every other text as well. So that's
bad.
Yeah. Yeah. So that's the one area where that April 11th, although it is approved, I think that one's still continuing to get a lot of pushback. And I wouldn't be surprised if something changes with that.
With the April 10th one though, Preston, does that mean obviously like having to prove that we removed them, are we saying section them off? Like section
You
them
just
off?
remove them from any text or calling, right? So not only is it that, but you actually have to, which is easy for us, right? Like in real estate, you have to do it within 10 days. They opt out, you have to do it within 10 days, which is easy. But you think about like these bigger corporations, and they're sending marketing text or sending account text message or sending different things out. They have to opt them out of everything within 10 days. So that's the one, April 11th, 2025. And when you think about TCPA, what I tell people, like a lot of times they'll ask like, oh, they opting out of text, can I still email them? You got to think TCPA is Telephone Consumer Protection Act, right? So it was actually originally passed in 1991, and it was passed because it did not want consumers receiving fax to their home, like through auto dialing and all that. So it was originally passed to like stop. We haven't heard that word in a while. Uh, fax and people calling at dinner time. So it was set up originally for that. What else? And then there's different types of consent when you look at TCPA. There's express consent, express written consent, prior consent, and prior express written consent. The one that a lot of people talk about, you hear people saying, is you need prior written consent to continue to call the leads after text the leads after January 27th. And you got to be able to prove it. All right. So if you're generating leads and you have leads coming in from your website, whether it's a YLO, say you're a YLO client, right? And you're generating leads through pay-per-click, those are fine. Like those, you had consent that came in through your website and you could prove that. The problem is if you had any other kind of lead gen where you had realtor.com leads, Zillow leads coming in, or whatever it may be, those are the ones where it's going to be a little bit there. A lot of we've been sharing that you need to go and get consent to continue messaging them. Those are the ones that you'll have the issues because you'll need to be able to prove that they consented, and most likely they did not do a one-to-one consent because they came in through Zillow, realtor.com, or whatever it may be. And the disclaimers, a lot of those disclaimers, they'll say in the disclaimer that our real estate partners, our mortgage partners, and affiliates, and it'll go to a terms of service page or privacy policy page, and it'll share additional vendors. That's the big thing. Like when you think about this, is those are the ones you really need to get them to opt in again. And getting them to opt in, they could text you back, they could email you back. You want to get it in writing though. You want to get it via text or email, because obviously through phone, oral is not the consent you need. You really need something in writing and
So like
text.
it's full on just written consent then. So
Yeah.
even if it's like you have a conversation, so like for instance, Chrissy just asked here, if it's a live connection, how does that work? I mean, does that just mean like
You
we need
really
to
want to,
send them a follow-up text message
yeah,
and
you
have them
really
have
want to send them a follow-up text or a follow-up email, a live connection, a live call. Those are the ones that are because they're getting the consent originally on the call before it's transferred to you. So you want to make sure you email or text and just get them to reply to that email or text, and then you have consent. That's where the live transfer, the live calling gets a little bit tougher.
Got it. Yeah, text is evidence, Amy. Yeah, she said, can you text the lead to have the consent? Text for sure as well. But I mean, if you have DNC with that lead, then email is going to be your go-to always. Because you can have email evidence, right? Email evidence or text evidence of a written consent.
Yeah, email or text is fine.
Okay. What about companies like Ylopo using AI texting?
So if you look at the disclaimers, and we'll go into that in a little bit. If you look at the disclaimers, wherever they're coming in from, you have to tell them what you're sending, what type of messaging you're going to sending them. And the disclaimer I'm going to share that we use, it goes into AI texting and robocalling. When you look at Follow Up Boss, the definition of an autodialer is it has to store telephone numbers using a random or sequential number generator, produce a telephone number with random or sequential number generator. So the Follow Up Boss doesn't do that. Like Follow Up Boss, you generate a list based on the contacts in there. I'm not going to tell you Follow Up Boss is 100% safe, but if you look at the Supreme Court's definition of what an auto dialer is, Follow Up Boss is not that. So when you look at, and I think that Supreme Court ruling was 2021, was with Facebook. There was a case, and it talked about that, and it identified what an actual auto dialer is. Follow Up Boss does not do that. Now, AI texting, you have to have the verbiage in the disclaimer of what messaging you're actually going to send them. And all of this, like whenever you're looking at one-to-one consent, it's all like everything they're talking about is regulated technology, right? Like, so
Mhm.
if you get a shared lead, you could still call that lead with your cell phone. You can still text that lead with your cell phone. It's where you get into regulated technology is where the issues arise. And that's AI texting, that's, robocalling, that's auto dialing, that's, voicemail drops, all those things that are regulated technology. That's really where the TCPA laws and the guidelines have come into play as far as what they're, focused on stopping.
Yeah. Someone said, do you have some preferred verbiage to text asking for consent? I mean, we came up with the language of like, just, hey, we're cleaning out our database, just trying to make sure we have everybody's, like, if you want to still continue to receive alerts from us via text or email, just,
Yeah, I mean, I would keep it simple, right? Like
yeah,
that, there's no,
don't
I mean,
overcomplicate it.
yeah. I think you just want to say something like, hey, do you want to continue to receive properties from us and from time to time receive a text or an email or text or phone call? I mean, something along those lines, something simple, just get them to respond. And just, obviously if it's inside of follow up boss, then you have that recording. What you don't want to do is get into a situation where you're like, hey, well, I have the recording, but the recording was a phone call. Because if you did not let them know the phone call is being recorded, then you open up a whole nother can of worms. Like that's where, depending on the state, the per call fine could be up to $5,000 per call. Yeah, it's
Got
state
it.
based. Yep. So like California is one, some state like South Carolina. But if I call from South Carolina to California, I have to let them know. So it's not the actual state you're in, it's the actual state you're calling.
Got it.
Um, but yeah, so there's certain, I think there's 10 or 11, 12 states that have different guidelines based on the actual calling and recordings. Any other questions pop up?
No, there's that state based. So the big thing that we really have to focus on, I mean, honestly, is just what moving people to different spots in your database, like FUB users, moving them into like an archive or a DNC pond. Like that's just really a big. I mean, DNC rules have been around for years. You know what I mean? So just what it comes down to is just segmenting your database as much as possible. Someone asked if they don't respond to ask to opt out, is that permission? Is that like
Look,
basically saying if does silent mean yes? Or like, is that what you're basically asking?
if they didn't respond,
Yeah, if they don't respond to us when we ask for opt out, is that permission?
you would need to get them to opt in, not opt out.
Well, she's basically saying if like we ask them like, hey, all right, is it okay if we still send you messages and they don't respond to that? Is that still technically
That
not
is not,
opting?
that
That's
is not,
not opting out, but it's not also opting in. You know what I mean?
it's not opting in. No.
Got it. Is that how you're asking, Connie? You can tell me I'm crazy, but I think that's what I was trying to read less. What about circle prospecting? Someone asked about.
Circle prospecting, if it's say you use follow up boss based on the definition of regulated technology and auto dialer, you're fine. You obviously want to exclude the DNC numbers, right? Like, and the DNC number is not, somebody could have multiple phone numbers and say one or two of those are not on the DNC list. So you got to think like a DNC is associated with actual phone number and not the actual contact, right? So if you have additional numbers for a contact and say one or two of those are not on the DNC list, then you could call those. But circle prospecting, expireds, all that, you're fine. Just you just got to look at how you're calling them. And we had John Henson on, I think it was 2 weeks ago, and the one thing he said, like it's a spectrum, right? Like you look at the spectrum, one side you have like auto dialing 30,000 numbers at randomize, which is crazy. And then the other side of the spectrum, you have a rotary phone. So he's saying like get as close to a rotary phone as you can. Now he did bring up, somebody asked a question on that call if something like Mojo, Vulcan, and those would be considered an auto dialer. He goes, basically on risk, like 1 to 10, one being minimal risk, he would put the Vulcan and the Mojo dialers in like the 6 to 7 range. Where something like Follow Up Boss would be lower than that because obviously it's not a triple line dialer, it's 1 to 1. You create the list and you check, you have to hit the button every time you go through that. In the big,
Um,
go ahead.
go ahead. No, I was just gonna read some of the other questions you have here.
Go ahead.
Can we mention in our initial call that the call is being recorded, and then I supposed to send them a task asking them to reply with a why or something? I mean, yeah, I mean technically, right?
Yeah, I mean, well, you would have to state what it, you know what I mean? Like you can't say, hey, just reply with why. Like you have to have
Yeah, you
more.
have to state in the like text message, like, hey, just say why to confirm that you're okay with me sending you text.
Yeah, and Follow Boss has, I think they have the setting on there where it can automatically says this call is being recorded. I think
Gotcha.
a lot of people are using that now.
Yep. And once you get consent, someone said, once you get consent to continue reaching out, how long can you continue to reach out before having to get consent again?
If you get consent, it
Do you have consent until opt out again? Until
yeah,
yeah. So consent doesn't technically, if you get consent from someone to establish a business relationship of some sort, it's good until they opt out, like until they say no more.
correct. Even if they're on the DNC list and you receive consent, it's until they opt out. Now, best business practice
Is 90 days, right?
is 90 days because if those are the ones that could potentially be bigger issues, right? Like if and you think about it, like we train people to call and text X amount of times within X amount of days. Most likely, if there's been no kind of response or activity within 90 days, you want to move it into a separate pond. Don't let your agents call or text. You could still send emails and maybe do some behavioral trigger texts, but I would be very, very careful allowing your agents to just go into a pond and randomly call people based on activity if it's on the do not call list beyond 90 days.
Yeah.
Because those are, like I said, those are going to be the ones that could really come back and bite you.
If they're receiving text calls now and don't respond once you ask for permission to opt in, do we end all communication until we receive further future opt in after next Monday?
Say that again.
Yeah, I know. I'm trying to do that. If they're receiving texts or calls now and don't respond once you ask for permission to opt in, so like if we're sending messages out to them right now asking for them to opt in, do we just end all communication with them until receive for future opt in with them after Monday? Yeah.
It depends on where it came from, right? Like if you generate it from your company site, your personal site, you're an individual agent, they came in through there, you have that prior consent, right? Based on, and there's some debate too, depending on which attorney you speak to. Some are saying that, hey, they can't go back and say, hey, although it was a shared lead, you can no longer communicate with them, you
Right.
know. And some of them are saying, hey, after this date, everything moving forward, if it's a shared lead, it's got to be treated differently. And I know that's not a clear answer, but
It's yeah.
that's what we're dealing with, right? Like some attorneys are going to be, more on the conservative side, and some are going to be more on the aggressive side.
And if they're on the DNC list and opt in via email or text, you can still reach out. Yes, Alexis. You still
Yeah, and if the disclaimer they come in, and that's the one thing to look at too, like not only the disclaimers on your website, but also the disclaimers from your third-party vendors if you're receiving leads from any company. Just make sure what they have on their website whenever somebody signs up or registers, it's going to meet all the requirements based on what they're looking for. So here's ours just to give you an idea. And I went over this with our attorney. He's got a couple changes. They're very minimal, but just gives you an idea, and I could walk through them. So by registering on easyhomesearch.com website, you consent to receive calls, text, and emails from. It has Easy Home Search there, but say this was a county where we have a exclusivity partner in, it would actually show that team's name regarding, and you want to make sure when in the disclaimer, you need to say based on, what are they registering for and what kind of information are they going to receive from you? Like they can't register on a real estate side and all of a sudden you're selling them insurance, right? Or they can't, register on a real estate site and all of a sudden you're a lender calling them, so those are the things you got to be very careful on. This
because it's a
consent.
whole different screen, right? Like if you were to do that, like you'd have to basically say like after they sign into this, You would also have to basically be another page saying that they have to give approval to like your lender and all that other stuff.
Correct. Yeah. So yeah, exactly. This consent allows easy home search contact. So if this was a company, there would be a company name there in compliance with TCPA guidelines. We adhere to TCPA do not call guidelines as of January 24th. We have that set up where it dynamically pulls the current date. So like it pulls today's date. And then your consent is crucial for us to provide you with timely and relevant information about your real estate needs. So again, tie it back to what they're registering for, right? Don't do super minimal text. You want it at least to be at 10 font is what I've been told. You want to bold, if you can, if you have the ability to bold the company that's going to be messaging them. Please be aware that Easy Home Search may utilize SMS, MMS communications, AI generated voice, marketing communications as part of this consent. Automated technology may be employed in communications. Consent is not a condition to obtain any goods, services, or credit. Additionally, Easy Home Search may use pre-recorded or artificial voice messages in outreach efforts.
And then someone said, can you go over the online lead flow, like all the text and call voicemail follow-up needs to be manual going forward? So she's basically saying we can't use any automations, I'm assuming, like automated follow-up text messages when they register. I'm assuming things like that.
No, we can. Yeah, you can. If they opt
in.
in and you're sharing in that opt-in how you're actually going to be communicating with them.
How it says down there at the bottom, please be aware that Easy Home Search may utilize SMS, MMS communications, AI generated voice technology, and marketing community. So like you're specifically telling them that we will be potentially reaching out via automation of some sort.
Yeah. Yeah. Like if you go, and I'm sure they probably, let's look at it now, actually, see if they've changed it. Hopefully nobody works for realtor.com. Actually, I don't care. So like, if you look at this and Monday's 27th is 2 days away, right? So
yeah, 3 days.
3 days. Yeah. Wow.
You're sick. Listen, it's been a long week, okay?
Yeah.
Kids been out of school, it's stowed for the first time in 15 years. It's a whole different animal.
So here is the consent from realtor.com.
Oh, that's in Connecticut?
By proceeding, you consent to receive calls and texts at the number you provided, including marketing by autodialer and pre-recorded and artificial voice from realtor.com, Move Sales Inc., others, and the following parties checked below about your inquiry. So like others, persons who may contact you include real estate professionals such as agents, brokers, mortgage professionals, lenders, mortgage brokers, affiliates, insurers. That's not good. So
someone had a question about Red X as well as high risk. Would that be high risk? Like I just cannot leave automated voicemails and avoid the DNC list? I mean, can you call people that are like on those lists that are not on the DNC list? Like say for instance, people are in your database and like they're not on the DNC. Are you able to call them? Because I mean, like FSBOs and expireds and stuff that tell a lot of people are getting those. FSBOs and expireds are not on the DNC. Can you call those?
if they're not on the DNC, yes, but you got to think like that was one thing John brought up. Like, where does Mojo, Vulcan, Red X, where does it fall on that, say, 1 to 10 scale, 10 being super, super risky, 1 being not so risky? It was in the 6 to 7 range. Because you remember Hunter asked that.
Yep.
I think who it was. So yeah.
Yeah.
But yeah, so that one was one of the ones that are going to be more risky. Follow-up boss is not going to be as risky. It's not a triple line dialer. I know a lot of people are actually uploading a list, like a expired list or a circle prospecting list into follow-up boss and then using that. So there's, from everything we've seen, it's less risk there.
We got 30 minutes here. Do you want to just Q&A? I can read these quickly to you.
Yeah. I mean, we'll go another 15 minutes for sure.
Deal. Well, what if they're on the DNC and we haven't spoken to them in 6 months, but they're actively looking at homes on Sierra or Fellow in the last 2 weeks? Would we be safe since they are engaged?
Again, it depends on where they came from. It's always going to tie back where you received the initial consent. Yeah. If you received the initial consent from your company website, from your personal website, if you're an individual agent, you're safe.
Because I've
Them,
heard what
them,
people are doing with like fellow, like they'll take like leads from like
now them
download
just,
leads, they'll upload them into fellow
yeah,
and then charge them.
them just searching on your website gives you no consent. Like them just looking around, that's just, you can't, you can't just say, oh, because they're searching on our site, that means they've given us consent.
Yep.
Yes, I think what you're going to see a lot of people do when you think about this is do some type of pop-ups, right? Like, hey, this person has never responded to us. Let's do some kind of pop-up where, hey, they're searching again, they're active, and it could just be a pop-up and it records that consent again, for them to continue to reach out to them.
Can you text your old leads with happy holidays from your CRM if you and the old leads don't have written consent? I mean, to be honest, I would change up your message if you're doing happy holidays, first of all. But it's just me personally.
If you don't have,
Yeah, if you didn't, yeah, old leads in your CRM, if you never got written consent, if I go into any database, old to new, and just start
it
sending
just,
happy
well, yeah, I
holidays.
mean, yeah. I mean, it depends on where the initial consent came in, but
If it's a bunch of import leads or sourced like Mojo or Land Voice, don't start doing that. Just,
no,
please don't do that.
no, just make sure, try to get, between now and Monday, try to get them to respond. And if they do, if between now and Monday, if they do stay this, when they stay it, it means they will move this out another 60 days, right? So instead of Monday, it would be March, whatever 60 days is from Monday. So, that would happen in March. I don't see them doing that, but just because one-to-one consent was bipartisan, so it was something that Republicans and Democrats agreed with. So I don't see them pushing it off, but it could potentially happen, and we're pushing to try to get that to happen.
Have you by chance talked with any of the major lead generators, i.e. Zillow, HomeLight, Referral Exchange, what the measures they're taking to be compliant? They said they couldn't find anything online.
I just showed you realtor.com. Based on their disclaimer, it's not compliant based on what TCPA is recommending.
I would recommend reaching out to them directly.
I mean, I know what we're doing from Easy Home Search.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it's, we're taking we don't do shared leads, so we're
Very much one-to-one.
whoever it's going to, that company's information is the only information shared. We don't even have a checkbox, because if we were saying we are going to be sending out a message from Easy Home Search, whoever the team we partner with, there's got to be a checkbox.
Yep.
Because there's two, right? So we just pull in the information for that team, put that team in the disclaimer, and that's who the information is going to, right? So that is who it's saying that's going to, send text message, make calls, use AI, whatever it may be. From what I've been told, realtor.com is going to do, and I guess they'll launch it Monday, is they're still going to have the disclaimer where, realtor.com can contact them. They're going to have the team that lead is going to, with another checkbox that they're going to have to check. If the consumer does not check that box, unless it's a pre-filled box and they uncheck it, if they do not check that box, then it's not express written consent.
And then here, real fast, can we also add a disclaimer at the bottom? Well, Jessica, email, you're totally fine to keep doing email.
Yeah, email. So TCP is Telephone Consumer Privacy Act.
Gotcha.
And that's another thing when you think about it. Like, a lot of people have been asking, can I still text recruits, realtors, recruiting?
Yep.
You can if they're not on the DNC list.
Yep. And then
Because you got to think the TCPA is for consumers, and that would be a business call or text.
Got it. Someone said we have EXP in our consent wording rather than our company. Is that too broad to cover?
Yeah, you want to have your team name.
Okay.
If it's an agent, you want to have the agent's name. If it's a team, you want to have the team name. And that's the other thing, like, where is this going to head? Because I can promise you, EXP LBT, all these, they probably don't want just their information only shared on the disclaimer, right? Because all of a sudden they assume additional liability. It needs to be the individual team information there.
And then unless they've opted in to receive calls from other providers, the person buying that lead wouldn't need to be getting written consent before they call a call, right?
Hold on, let me answer Karen's question real quick.
Okay.
Karen, I would check with Sierra. I mean, maybe that's something they did with, checked with their TCPA attorneys to get that. Because I would imagine with them, they went over the disclaimer pretty deeply. But I would just check with them and see. But I think you would want to have your team name there for sure. It could be just team with EXP Realty or whatever it may be. Go ahead. What were you saying, Travis?
Let me read this one. If I were to put a list of homeowners of a particular neighborhood on one of my buyer clients that one of my buyer clients are interested in into Mojo, should I just call one by one instead of using the auto dialer?
You could, so if you're circle prospecting, is that what you're doing?
So he's basically saying he has a list of people and he uploads them into Mojo. Should, instead of doing the full Mojo like 3-line dialer, should he just do one at a time, like through Mojo? Still, I think Mojo is still technically considered an auto dialer.
It's not based on Supreme Court,
Oh.
but it is more risky than say
Rotary
Follow
dial.
Boss. Well, no, than Follow Boss,
Yeah,
right?
got it.
Yeah. So really like I shared earlier, the autodialer is storing a telephone number using a random or sequential number generator to create a call list. So it's randomized and sequential number generator. And Follow Boss, I don't know, Mojo does that. I don't think so. I think it calls through a list that you upload. But there is going to be more risk there, yes, than, and obviously this is what conversations I've had with our attorney. I mean, definitely if this is something that you're worried about, speak to your attorney on it. But it's definitely going to be more risk than say Follow Boss, but it's not technically an auto dialer.
Okay. We were trying to text our database to get them to opt in. After about 100 texts, we got a message from FUMP saying that we couldn't send messages or carriers would mark us as spam.
Is that the limit with Follow Boss?
No, I don't. That's not necessarily the limit. I mean, it depends.
Is it based on the same message going out over and over again?
Yes and no. A lot of the times what they'll do is they'll tell you that you're getting marked as spam because like they got a certain amount of opt-out. They had it as a template. So what they're doing is they're trying to tell you that your template is performing not high. So if you don't get a certain amount of yeses or responses, people have seen that message after sending 30 messages using the template. So it's grading it off of the template itself. If you were to type out every single message, you probably wouldn't get flagged, but they're doing it off of a template. So the problem is if it's not scored high enough, you'll get flagged for that.
Yeah, I mean, I think you're going to see, I would think you're going to see a good response mixing it up using email and text. But again, if they originally came in through your website, they came in through your company's site, you have that initial consent. It's the one where it's like the third party, you don't know if they're shared leads or what they may be. And then if it ever comes up, there's no way for you to prove that they actually gave one-to-one consent to be contacted.
Let me see here. Does this mean we cannot call a skip trace list that are pulled from a certain area? Ooh, that's a good one.
Skip trace list.
So basically like a list that we go out and find, like, say we got a bunch of emails and names, we didn't get phone numbers, but we're able to grab their phone numbers and now we start calling them as she's asking to do that. So kind of like what we used to do. If a lead register without a phone number, I went to truepeoplesearch.com, found the phone number and then called it. I'm probably not supposed to be doing that.
I mean, as long as it's not on the do not call list, like that's really, when you look at that, that's your biggest risk if it's on the do not call list. Like that's where the fines are going to be the heaviest, like from $500 to $1,500 per phone call.
Got it. Explain it to me like I'm 5. If we're using FUB and calling manually in our ponds, provided those people are not on the DNC, are we safe or safe adjacent? Explain it to me like I'm 5.
It based on everything we've been the attorney shared with us that follow-up boss is low risk, right? So it's low risk if those leads you're calling came in from a source that you could prove that they opted in.
Someone said, sorry, I joined late. In regards to slide dial, the last webinar mentioned it depends on marketing versus intentional. Can you give examples of that?
Marketing versus intentional.
I think.
That might have been.
Oh, are they basically? What was that?
That might have been something John Henson answered, maybe.
Maybe. What about the difference between reaching out to people with information versus soliciting them for business? So maybe that actually might be what it is, marketing versus intentional. So like if you're just reaching out to try and provide value, or if you're actually reaching out to try and be salesy or pitch them.
I think they're going to be about the same thing, right? If you're being educational, you're trying to generate business.
Yeah. And she said, yeah, John brought that up. The one about the slide dial, marketing versus intentional.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think I think that's another one. It depends on it. You know, if it came in through an opted-in source, that's going to be fine.
Got it. Is it true that we have to have our SOI re-opt in after 18 months?
No.
Okay. But coming in, and let me see here. But coming in initially through our website, they are on the DNC. We can only call or text them for 90 days unless we gain consent through text or email for continued communication. Is that true? So basically saying if a lead comes in on the DNC, can call and text them every day for 90 days straight on day 91?
You could still call and text them beyond that. It's just not very wise to do so. Like if
So
they,
it's a best advice or guidelines that we'd recommend
well,
following.
it's definitely a best practice. Like because those are going to be the ones that could potentially be the biggest issue. Is the ones on the DNC? It's actually in the DNC language as well. It talks about the 90 days, but that's why we're telling people like if they opted in and they're on the do not call list, you could call them. But it probably doesn't make sense if they haven't responded to anything in 90 days to move them to a different pond where the agents can't call them.
And someone just said, and I'm going to pull this up real fast to show them. Someone asked, and I'm going to share my screen if I'm able to. We're using Easy Verify. How does the DNC show up in FUB? Can I just show them real fast? I have a lead pulled up.
Yeah.
I boarded everything out. This is how it shows up. So obviously the number up here is going to have mobile DNC. It'll be tagged Easy DNC. And then down here, you'll see we have custom fields and things like that built into it. And not to mention,
the embedded.
The embedded app as well. This is coming soon.
That's live right now.
Actually. Oh, is it live right now? The data enrichment? Cool. Yeah. But yeah, so that's how it's going to show up in Easy Verify. So just to make it super simple and easy, simplicity is key. What about people you have had in your database for years but have no proof of one-on-one consent? Should we be concerned? So leads that opted in like maybe years ago, maybe you moved CRM and you lost that ability to show registration date. Because I mean, people move CRMs all the time. Like, how does that affect things?
I mean, if there's, that's another thing too. Like if the number is super old, then you got to worry about the reassigned number database. Like if you're not having, that's another thing that, not to throw more stuff to worry about, but if it's a super old number in your database, there's a potential chance that that number was reassigned at some point, meaning somebody gave up that number, was reassigned to somebody else, and then, which the reassigned number is just stupid. Like if they could find you if somebody registered with their phone number, they got rid of the phone number in a year, that number is reassigned to somebody else after 45 days. If you text that number or call that number, they could file a complaint because they never registered for anything. So that's the one thing that you got to worry about on the super older leads. Like, is that phone number even a legitimate phone number anymore?
Is this something we have to opt into with FUB? Kathy, are you asking? I think you're asking about Easy Verify. I can send you a message after this. If they opt in and opt-in expires and they come back to the website, can they get re-prompted to opt in again? Jamie, that's very difficult to do. You'd have to like that. You just wouldn't want that because technically what Preston just said, it is best practice to not reach out to them, but it is not technically something you guys cannot do. It's just what we recommend. If they're ignoring all your messages, don't just continue to hound them. They're just looking.
And Andrea, a recording will be sent out to everybody that registered.
We text call slide dial recently expired to see if they still want to sell and if they want an offer. We are getting the info from Mojo. That's what someone said.
I would pull slide dial off of there. Yeah. Texting and calling, circle prospecting expireds. You know, that was brought up on the last call with John. He just said it depends on the phone system you use. Mojo Vulcan was in the 6 to 7 range of like being a concern, you know, from 1 to 10, and then follow bus is below that. So
got it. And now let me see here real fast. We spoke. What about a lead? And we kind of gone over this, but it's always good to say again. What about a lead who we've spoken to? They've given verbal consent, but haven't given written consent, email or text, and they are on the DNC. Are they okay to call for the 90 days? I mean, that just got to use your judgment, right? Like that's a person that you've like. Do you really think they're the type of person that would be a legal issue?
if TCP, so for phone calls only or text as well.
So it's basically he just got verbal consent. He didn't get written consent. This person had a conversation with him, said, "Yeah, you can follow up with me in 6 months." But
If it's like if they called your cell phone number, that's different. More than what we're talking about earlier is more on the live transfers. Like if it's transferred from a third party, right? Because they got the initial consent. But if they're calling you from like a sign or calling you from anything, you have the ability to call them back. But what we are talking about earlier was more is like if I'm a lead generator and I, you know, somebody inquires on our site and then we do a live transfer. For me, I get the initial consent and I transfer it to another agent. That initial consent was with me, not the other agent.
What I think this person might be referring to though is if I'm like just in your pond in your database, just calling leads and I have a good conversation with them and like they tell me, yeah, of course you can follow up with me and say I do send them a text message, but they never reply back that text message. But like I had a great phone call.
You're fine there. You're fine in that scenario.
Yeah, it's like
the scenario we were talking about earlier was if it's a live transfer, not if it's actual like a call within your database.
Yeah, because I mean, it's not you're not getting written consent, but you got them on the phone and had a good conversation with them on the phone. I mean,
yeah, the scenario we're talking about earlier was if it was a live transfer from a third party that they originally had a conversation and they transfer it to an agent.
TCPA is for phone calls only or text as well. Isn't that the big change? The fact that phone call rules went also include text rules now. So like if you opt out on phone or if you opt out in text, that means you can't call. Like if you opt out over phone, you can't text.
That's the one that's April 11th.
That's the April 11th. Got it. Yeah. Text is being considered the same as phone. What about if someone calls, the call is not answered, they don't leave a voicemail, and they don't answer when you call back? How risky would it be 1 to 10 to auto text them using a smart plan?
Someone calls, the call is not answered, they don't leave.
I love these questions. It's like these what ifs.
How would you call them? Yeah, they called you, right? Like
yeah, they called you, call them back.
It doesn't stop you from calling people back. Again, the scenario I shared earlier was if it's a third party lead generator, they live transfer a call to you. So originally I have that conversation, then it's a transfer to you and then you pick it up. That's a different scenario than what you're talking about here.
And that is what he is talking about though, is like, if I call you and you
that's fine.
But if I put you, is it okay if like I just put you on a AI now to like just let you
no
like an auto smart plan now texting to let you just go?
I don't know if I'll do that. I mean, it depends on
how they opted in originally.
So much is going to tie to that original opt-in and what's shared there. just
And
make
like,
sure
yeah.
disclaimers are written in a way that if somebody opts in, all these questions you're asking about the type of calling I could do, the type of texting I could do, you can do that because they opted in from a source that shares exactly the way you're going to communicate with them.
And this is a good one.
And
Does consent transfer from an in-house ISA to an agent, especially if if the opt-in says they're calling from this organization, like this company, and they work for that company.
yeah, I mean, most likely the ISAs are calling opted in leads that came in through the website, right? Like
Yeah.
whatever they may be. So
Should be
yeah,
under
that's
the
fine.
umbrella of that. Yeah, that makes sense. Got it. Will notes on a nonverbal communication in our system help? So essentially, like the FUB transcript that says, "Hey, are you okay to be opted in?"
No,
Not technically, yeah.
no,
I mean, it's
no.
always going to be good to have, and if something was to happen, like so to
Are
say.
you talking about the summaries that Follow Up Boss
Yeah,
does?
summaries and follow up boss. If you ever get in trouble, I'm assuming you can download that call. But
Yeah, I mean, as long as they knew about the recordings,
oh yeah, that's the other thing. Making sure
yeah,
they're in a place
as
where
long as
they
they knew
know.
about the recordings, there's and I've been digging into a lot of this. There was a lawsuit in California where they called in and totally different, irrelevant, kind of irrelevant, but they called into Domino's and Domino's used AI to take the order, did not share with the lady that they're using her conversation to help build out the AI. So they filed like a $20 million lawsuit. Because Domino's did not let them know that they were speaking to AI during the order process.
Got it.
Yeah.
If an agent or a team member violates or gets fined, does the broker/team leader also get in trouble?
Well, no, I mean they can't fine, like the fine's $500 to $1,500, depending on where it could, because agents are independent contractors, so it could just be on the agent. The thing to think about TCPA though, it's one of the few regulations where you can't hide behind an LLC or corporation. Like you can't bankrupt the LLC or bankrupt the corporation and think you're protected. They could actually go after you personally. Um, there's been several cases shared. TCPA World is a good place, tcpaworld.com, where they go into a lot of, most people probably don't want to dig into this. I do it because of easy home search, right? Like it's good. Whatever, if you're in an organization, somebody needs to own this within your organization. They need to understand what TCPA, what the guidelines are. Not everybody within your team needs to understand it, but somebody needs to own it to where you have systems built out, processes built out to make sure you're meeting all the requirements. But that's when you're thinking about that's some tcpaworld.com is a good resource that goes into a lot of this stuff.
You
Any other
questions fired
questions?
up?
Sweet. Sweet. I made it through.
9 minutes to spare.
I didn't croak on the call.
It's all good.
All right. Well, thank y'all for coming. We'll send out the recording. They usually send it out pretty quickly. So everybody that registered, it'll go out to you. If you have any other questions,
Stay
please let me
warm.
know. See y'all.